Police officers executing an arrest within the defendant's home or a third party's home. How is this done and how is this lawful? First, a way for an officer to enter the defendant's home to execute an arrest of that defendant is if the officer, number one, has an arrest warrant by a judge. A warrant basically is slight or marginal evidence that the defendant committed a crime. Very straightforward. It's very low standard. So once they have that arrest warrant, they can in fact use that warrant to enter the defendant's home if they have a reason to believe that the defendant was in that home. Payton v. New York makes that very clear. I'll cite the case above. Secondly, when it comes down to an officer executing an arrest warrant of the defendant within a third person's house, they can do this in two ways. The first way is if the officers have a search warrant of the third party's house. So they have two warrants, which is probably the best thing for an officer to do if they really want all the evidence in, is number one, have an arrest warrant of the defendant. Secondly, have a search warrant of that house that the officers believe the defendant is in, and then execute the arrest warrant and find the defendant in the home, arrest the defendant, and find whatever evidence in the home to not only prosecute the defendant, but also find a way to prosecute the homeowner. But if the officers execute the arrest warrant by going into the third party's home without a search warrant, basically whatever evidence they find in the house, let's say they find drugs, they cannot use that evidence against the homeowner. So the homeowner is basically nearly free of getting prosecuted because that is fruit of the poisonous tree. Okay? When it comes down to the defendant, though, unless the defendant has a reasonable expectation of privacy within that home, and in my example, the defendant does not, then whatever evidence they find in that house will be used against the defendant. So that's the key way that the police can basically execute an arrest warrant within his or her home and or a third party's home.